Hi there.
Yo, all right, here we go.
Hey there. Greetings, Jeremy. Um,
Greetings to you and our viewers.
Fantastic. It's Dr. Paul and Jeremy. It's cold out and got inspired to do a quick talk during lunch break. Um, just to review, a very useful concept from way back in 2001. I found this. I should have known about it by now, but it's every now and again something out of research pops out, and I'm like, oh wow, how did I miss that 2 decades ago?
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
so this is not going to be about a full, as far as I can tell, a full blown model or theory, but it's a psychological principle surrounding relationships that's very sound, solid, and even practical and useful. Other than Gottman, we talk about Gottman a lot, how that's really the highest technology of committed relationships. There really is no technology yet, except ours, wink, wink, for those who are single or just getting started on analyzing a relationship they're getting into or choosing the right people in the first place. But it's called Russ Bolt's um, model of commitment. And and I'm just going to do my layman's version. And Jeremy, you can flesh this out because you've studied this intensively. But Russ Bolt's model of commitment started with the observation in actual couples as well as in the research. Why do some couples stay together despite it being kind of a losing game? Like there's less to gain by staying together than by breaking up. Why did they do that? And one view, of course, is going to be people's kinds of attachments, right? As somebody who's an
Yes.
anxiously attached person is going to stay around and be codependent. There's the idea of codependent boundaries that you've heard us talk about a lot. But
Yep.
this is an interesting, different way of seeing it, and it's from all the way back in 2001, around the same time as a film called Serendipity came out, a film I love, although critics horribly panned it. But it was a very light, bubbly, but kind of makes you think a bit philosophically about love and its potential and its hopefulness. And from there, it's been all downhill with a lot of depiction of romance in the cinematic world since then. And I wondered why. So I wrote an article about it. And in the course of that, I found this Rust Bolt concept. And again, the reason it arose is, why do couples stay together despite it being kind of a losing game for both of them? And what Rust Bolt found, Cheryl, I believe is her first name, Cheryl Rust Bolt, was that there are three factors that are causing that actually determine the cohesiveness of a committed bond. So I would see this as going hand in hand, not as a whole theory, but as a singular principle that I found highly useful in analyzing romantic comedies. And this is the
Mhm.
1 century mark of romantic comedies. We've just hit 100 years of romantic comedy production, and the theory goes that there are three factors that are largely responsible for a relationship maintaining cohesiveness as a committed relationship. And one is their satisfaction. Now, that's a broad term. I take it to mean happiness. I take it to mean the absence of sadness, anxiety, and depression, and therefore of probably of there being too much conflict. Being
Mhm.
happy with each other. When the female tells the male, "I'm not happy," well,
Mhm.
what exactly does that mean? Well, in our terminology, it means the friendship is lacking, because friendship within a relationship is based on happiness. How happy
Yes.
do I make you to be around you? And are you happier around me than alone, than not around me? Satisfaction is the word. The second one is kind of a inverse opposite. Um, the absence of it is good for cohesiveness, and it is alternatives, meaning alternatives to your current partner. And I got the idea that, wow, that back in 2001, online dating was kind of strange, sketchy. I didn't know a lot of people who did it, although I
Mhm.
dated that far back. I didn't use it, and now today it's everything. And I wonder about the paradox of choice and how you can access millions of profiles today. And so alternatives has gone through the floor down the drain in these Rust Bolt categories of cohesive, committed relationships. That would be very largely responsible, I think, today as a culture for why people can't find committed relationships. Besides even the paradox of choice, it's that there are just too many alternatives.
Sure.
At least pseudo alternatives. They seem
Yeah.
real, but your Facebook friends aren't your actual friends, as you know. The third
Yeah.
category, the third category is the what is it?
Investment.
Oh,
Investment
it's
side.
investment. How much have we both invested, or how much have I invested in terms
Yes.
of time, energy, money, trust, bonding, um, spiritual, like all the forms of psychological resource investment? How much have we
Yes.
done? And
Yeah.
there's the economic concept of sunk losses, right? The more
Yes.
you've
The
plunked
sunk cost
down on
phenomenon.
something, the more you're like, I can't let it go, even though it's like a gambler. I
It
can't let it
is.
go,
Behavioral
even though
economics.
it's not good for me. I put so much
Yeah.
into this, I can't stop.
Yeah.
Right? So there's that, but there's also an upside to that too. It's the idea of honor, that honor is
Yes.
retained value for past good deeds done, or investments. Retained value for past investments. It's
Yeah.
not like, "What have you done for me lately?" like the song, or, "If you like it, you
Yeah.
better put a ring on it." It's that, "Hey, it's a two-way street, and, let's be good to each other, let's invest in each other." So however much investment you've done, higher amount means more commitment. That's why couples
Yeah.
with kids might stay together even if they fight. It's why couples with joint finances might tend to stay together more or for a longer period. So, Jeremy, what do you think of these three factors discovered by Rust Bolt that largely explain the cohesiveness of committed relationships?
I think that it's phenomenal. So I think it definitely provides a great framework for thinking about the what I would call the implicit calculations that we make about relationships, right? Like the feeling of, well, this is cozy, this is comfortable. I've got a lot of investment. We've got mutual friends. That's that investment piece, right? So what I like is that there's actually a divide between investment into intrinsic and extrinsic, where the intrinsic is what you put into the relationship, the effort, money, possessions, emotional energy, and that shared narrative that you build. And then extrinsic
Yeah,
actually is what the relationship yields as kind of dividends, if you want to go economic, with children, friends that you meet as a couple, shared memories. And I think that investment size, like what you generate from the relationship together, that being what you're afraid to lose by choosing differently. Oh, are you still there?
I'm here.
Okay, good. I just couldn't
Oh,
see you. So that makes perfect sense as what we're kind of hoping to avoid losing. I think there's a few factors that have made it easier for people to walk away from the investments. I think the destigmatization of divorce as no fault, right? I believe in fault divorce. I believe in a divorce for abuse, assault, whatever. But the idea that if you fall out of love, it's a death sentence to the relationship. I think that's a huge thing that throws investments into jeopardy. As like, well, yeah, we have all this going, but I've lost that spark, and it's not really worth it to work that out and generate it in an unromantic, tactical, therapeutic way, right? And then how we view the lifespans. People in their 40s and 50s and 60s, we're talking 60s, the gray wave of divorce could be a whole topic that we do. But statistically,
right,
people
right.
in their 60s and setting whatever are divorcing at higher rates. Well, so they have a new narrative. You and I both work in the psychology realm. You prescribe medicine and do psychology. I do psychology and do trauma work as a therapist. We traffic in narratives. Well, the narrative now is that it's never too old, basically, to cut off a relationship and find your bliss, right? Eat, pray, love. Time to get divorced in
Oh.
40s or 50s and then start over. And so I actually think we've entered into an era of almost irrational immortality perspective of it doesn't matter that this time's behind me. What I have in front of me, I can optimize, I can keep selecting and pull the lever. So I think online dating is a mechanism that tempts with that. And I think that what sets the nail was kind of the death knell of like the final straw is this idea we have about the lifespan that you need to keep pursuing this bliss in finding a partner that's even a better match. Because if you didn't have that worldview, then the alternatives wouldn't be as attractive. You could say, yeah, there's other people, but look what I've built with my partner. What would happen to my kids and their schooling and them going between houses if we divorce? Like that calculus, I think, is
Yes.
less at play. It's like, well, the kids will be fine. And so when divorce has become widespread, you can also say, well, look how many kids it happens to, and they're all fine. So you can rely on that and outsource that as kind of a rationalization. So I love this model because I think it gives people the tools to see, just like you said, what's changed since '01? What has changed in our culture to say these investments do or don't matter enough to stick together with someone? It's a big question. And I
Yes.
think dating is the vehicle of temptation, online dating very often. But to weaken yourself to engage in that alternative seeking, you have to think like it's worth it to uproot all that I have now to go this way and to cheat and possibly start vine swinging, branch swinging from one relationship to another, which I think has also lost a lot of stigma. I think the idea of courtship, which you use the term courtship a lot. Well, what is it? Tactical, one person at a time dating, in my view. Courting is different than dating. Dating is let's throw everything, let's go on a bunch of different opportunities a week with people and see who I
Right,
fancy
right.
the most. It's like, well, that's very destigmatized. And I think people can get lost in the shuffle that way, quite literally, in the dating stack of, well, what's the shiny thing now? And the shiny thing versus what's hits your what actualizes your instincts, your emotional needs, and your frontal lobe needs as you divided in your model is very different because the shiny thing hits the instincts. That's not what you actually that triggers you, but it doesn't build that model of mature, wise dating that you've set forth. That's what's missing.
Wow. There are like seven different ways to go with
Yeah,
all that
sorry
you
about
just
that. I got
said. I
fired up.
no,
You
no,
primed me.
I love it. No, it's great. And by the way, Wally says hi, and he's working on some trauma with somebody. So yeah, trauma
Nice.
matters. Trauma can look a lot
Yes.
like narcissism.
Oh,
It could be
absolutely.
narcissistic injury, but to address some of these like 7 or 8 awesome ideas that you spark here, uh, I used to wonder why something felt not quite right about kind of playing the field and using technology to expand,
Mhm.
your access to dates or what
Sure.
have you. That always felt to me like, yeah, I didn't know how to word it without it being religious. And
Sure.
so I kind of see it as ethical, like ethics. We are more than just. You made me think of bonobo monkeys like running around. When you said
Ah,
we're somebody's jumping around playing different social media and different
yeah,
dating apps and so forth,
yeah,
like they're just an instinctual creature, an animal
yes.
in the forest, as opposed to what we are, which is way more than just having that to us. We have ethics, and ethics has something to do with boundaries. And when we really understand boundaries, we're a grown up. And when we're a grown up and have boundaries, when we start to enter in a pathway of courtship, we're headed toward commitment without having reached it yet. But as we
Mhm.
head there, we owe something to the person we are courting, and they owe us something of equal level of commitment. And I think that's where the Rust Belt comes in,
Yes.
because we aren't just bonobos running around eating and reproducing. We're way more than that, because of
Hmm.
ethics, and also because of this concept of honor. That honor
Yes.
is, I've invested in you so far. I wouldn't expect you to have invested more than me, but I expect you to have invested something, and that the value I have brought and you have brought are still of worth to us, even though they are in the past. And I think that's that third factor of Roosevelt, without having to make it a moralistic or religious argument, why
I love
dating
that.
ought to be more like courtship. It's a scientific way that happens to line up with many of the world's religions' thinkings on these matters. And then the alternatives concept, we are not computers. We aren't evolved to have this paradox of choice or millions
Mm-hmm.
of fantasied options. And what back to the film analysis using Roosevelt, one of the things I
Yeah.
love about the film Serendipity is that they the budding couple invests heavily in time on each other an entire evening. After a
Hmm.
chance encounter, they go with the investment of time and
Hmm.
storytelling to each other, to the point where they actually reach what we all call limerence, which is
Yes.
a fantasy experience. It's not real, it's magical, and it's off to the races with your imagination, but you're doing it consciously at the same time. You know it's happening to you, and you're simply enjoying the magic of falling in love. I think that principle of limerence is only possible through in-person meeting, which necessitates chance encounter, because you don't know who's coming to the party before you go to the party in
Sure.
person. And I don't think limerence can happen online. I think that's something
Hmm.
else. I think that's something like delusional, addictive behavior, when people think they're falling in love with an avatar and a text message. I think
Yeah.
limerence is in person. Well, limerence, I think, is the ultimate antidote to the alternatives factor of Roosevelt. Limerence, because limerence is literally imbuing god or goddess like properties to this human that you've met.
Yeah.
You idolize them so much that they reach deity like status, even though it's fantasy and it's not real, and
Yeah.
you know it isn't. It can't. Nothing else can compete. The alternatives online can't compete. I can't
Right.
imagine John Cusack and Kate Beckinsale's characters thinking of anyone else when they are together for an entire evening on an unexpected date, what it amounts
Right.
to, and they get limerence. I think it's the antidote to alternate too many alternatives, paradox of choice, right?
And that's a great perspective on it. Yes. Yeah.
And then
Absolutely. I mean,
satisfaction, that's just Gottman's communication techniques. How to be happy with someone else has to do with you being optimistic, looking for the positive in them, trying to find your own happiness, get your own treatment of your sadness, depression, and anxiety, especially trauma. Since Wally's here, I thought I'd shout out about the
sure.
importance of trauma treatment to have satisfaction. Even if you're traumatized and it wasn't your spouse's fault that in your past you're traumatized, it's not their fault, but your trauma still is creating sadness for you, which is
Yeah.
all you have to give emotionally to them. And it's how you communicate to them negatively and with a pessimistic worldview caused by your trauma. So you're hurting your own relationship by keeping your trauma and not going and getting it healed.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, so I love the limerence. I think It's almost like an idealizational mindfulness. Like you're in the moment and you're idealizing a partner, you're impressed, you respect them. So dating online is very mindless. It's very dissociative. It's very focused on multitasking. You swipe and choose some people. You send texts based on fractioned, sort of fragmented profiles that are necessarily slices only of someone's personality. There's really a divided focus there. And so there's not that savoring of a full sensory experience. And so it makes perfect sense that the antidote to that would be a full immersion in a positive present experience, which is something like
Yes.
that's a mouthful because we don't do that with a lot of anything, romance excluded now, like mindful eating, mindful hobbies, mindful enjoyment of masculinity through going to the gym, through a hobby that involves mastery. All of those things have really suffered, and I think have contributed to a cascade of things because the men's loneliness epidemic comes from not doing communal hobbies, um, and the loss of self confidence and esteem from men comes from not engaging in things that are mastery or active involved. And so with dating, like I think we talked months ago, like in Top Gun, the courtship ritual of singing at the bar was like this fun communal guy experience. And now, what is the Gen Z male opportunity for courtship? Sending a really well thought out text message on Bumble. Like, how is that showing your masculine virility and your vivaciousness, your passion, to use the word that you use in your curriculum so often? It's not really. So the depresculinity epidemic is coming from a lack of limerence in male joie de vivre, like that passion for life. And women are suffering it too. There's not the feminine energy in online exchanges. I would argue that online dating is more feminine in terms of it being more uh, focused on things like almost like a romance novel, right? Well, they pull in the visual aspect for men of pictures. It kind of tries to take the most simple forms of masculinity and femininity, right? But
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
loses that fun polarity that's generated by in-person exchanges, obviously. But I don't think it was obvious that it would change our whole culture and take away a lot of the space for it. I don't think. I hope that wasn't as obvious because I mean, it has done that.
Yeah. I couldn't have ever called it obvious because I never had words for it
Sure, me neither.
that were scientific. I just had an intuition and kind of
Uh huh.
moral objections, but now this roost bolt, it's almost like we're being detectives, solving a mystery when we use some discover some of these rediscover some of these principles
Sure.
because they really do explain what's going on in a way that parallels human goodness.
Yes.
And what you were saying about what's missing in online interactions, and a lot of what we write in romantopedia.com about the friendship phase of relationships, the boyfriend, girlfriend. Why do we call them friend? It's because it's mammalian brained, it's emotion based. Borrowing from Aristotle, his models of friendship, um, the model that I propose is friendship is consistent, mutual, shared, positive emotion. Consistent, mutual, shared, positive emotion. The consistent is for having good boundaries. The mutual is fairness, honoring the value brought to the table by both people. It's fair to them both. I lean on your shoulder, you lean on mine equally.
Yeah.
And then the shared is the in-person sensory aspect. It's not a real friendship or a real love without the real in-person humanity of shared
Hmm.
together experience,
Sure.
together time. And then positive emotion is the core of it all. If it's not positive emotions, then it's not loving, it's not love. So and some of that's from Aristotle. So
Yeah.
that explains the satisfaction variable. So for now, I mean, we could probably do much more with this, but I would call it a razor. This
I
principle is a
like that.
razor. In other words, you can define, analyze, chop up almost any relational situation and analyze it with this as a device, including movies. And I found that
Yeah.
applying this to romantic comedies, I looked at La La Land, and that was like the halfway point to the dark side of our culture with romance. And it's where career ambition
Hmm.
is very tempting, maybe more tempting than romance. So I'm
Sure.
going to go with career. If I have to pick one or the other, I'm going to pick career. But it turns out lasting love has to have a balance of both career development and investment in the person
Yes.
and in your love. And that was La La Land's dilemma. And it tips into the dark side at the end, right? Just like
Yes.
our culture. And
Yeah.
now with 2019, we finally arrive at the third comparative film, Marriage Story, with Adam Driver
Yeah.
and Scarlett Johansson, right? Which is dark, 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 completely dark. And
Yes.
it fails all three. The difference between these is Serendipity passes with flying colors all three of Roosevelt's factors. La La Land is ambiguous on all three, and it's the dilemma that makes you think about the three. And then Marriage Story is minimal on all three. It's depleted of all three of Roosevelt's factors. So
Right.
yeah, I think more on that to come then. Uh,
Yeah. I agree
look
with you
into
completely.
Roosevelt's yeah,
I love it.
SET it's called social social emotional theory,
Oh, social
social
exchange theory. Yeah.
social
So it's
exchange
very
theory.
interesting. So the investment model is that Roosevelt pioneered is an outgrowth, like a development of social exchange theory. So it's kind of like it would almost be like how object relations came out of psychoanalytic thought. I guess it's like, and this investment model is a more specific usage
Oh,
of
got it.
social exchange theory. That's what I get from the article that we looked
It's
at.
a device or razor or
Yeah.
tool. It's a tool. It's a tool that emerges from a model,
I like Roosevelt's
right?
razor. That's got a good alliteration to it, Dr. D.
Oh yeah,
That's actually
Roosevelt's
pretty good.
razor. Yeah,
See,
like
you
Occam's
called it a
razor.
razor. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
great.
I think a takeaway on my end to be optimistic, because I sure didn't say a lot of optimistic today, but to if you look at what investments you're accumulating in a relationship and they're positive and you both are offering a lot to it, that could be a very good solution focused way and very positive uh, manner of analyzing your relationship, of saying, okay, so I don't like that they do this thing or that thing or whatever. Maybe I got the ick. That could be a whole thing we do about, like, oh, they did this thing that's superficial I don't like, but what are they bringing to it? What life-giving elements of this relationship are here that are investments coming that we're bringing and that are coming from the relationship. And I think a lot of couples would benefit from focusing on that and not just the same entrenched arguments that may or may not resolve and may or may not even need to resolve. May just be what they're comparing themselves to from TV or movies or from that optimizing sort of model.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
alternative model is what I would call that. Like,
Yeah. The alternatives factor is going to be hard for our society to beat without
I think it's
realizing that it's an empty experience to just do a ton of online dating. It's empty, and people say so. And maybe someday soon they'll realize, wow, in person is hot and new. To them, it's
yeah.
new. To me, it's the way it started. But
They're actually Gen Z and younger millennials especially, I think, are discovering that. I've read some articles. I need to repost them too, and we could talk about it, about how in-person stuff is becoming a bigger trend, and it's predicted to be one for this year. I mean, what's old is new again, and so much the better. I think, sadly, the collective trauma of online dating has hit enough people. That's the negative. The positive of it is, if it's done that and people are saying, let's opt out, then they'll create that good faith barrier to say, I'm going to treat you well in person and you're going to treat me well. Because if everyone's operating on different scripts and you have a few people trying to do the right thing and they're being preyed on by a lot of dark triad bad actors, that sucks. But if enough people say, let's purge of the optimization dating roulette model, then they'll stay
Yeah.
strong and have a wider network to continue that positive feedback loop. That's my hopeful, cautiously optimistic prediction on that.
Uh,
We'll see.
my wager is that they'll get so fatigued and sad with the algorithmic way
Yes.
that they'll drop out for a time, but then they'll get lonely and they'll start wandering out of their apartments and
Yeah.
see the sunlight and be like, "Oh wow, there are humans out here."
Yeah. Yeah.
And, "Oh, what's your name? Who are you?" And they'll find their way back into just naturally the human experience of in-person socializing,
Yeah.
and that's where the Roosevelt's 3 factors will again be at play. It'll be like, am I enjoying myself? This person make me feel happy, satisfaction? Um,
Yeah.
I feel the excitement and sensory experience of being in person. Nothing
Yes.
compares to that because they're right in front of me. Someone online is not. And then thirdly, am I, uh, uh, is this a person that if I invest in them, they seem likely to be the kind of person who would invest back? And let's find out
Yes.
if that's more successful than just being alone. That's
Yes.
investment in another person. Are you more successful together than alone?
That's a great
Yeah.
razor. That's beautiful. Yeah, I love that. Um, I'm with you on that 100%. I think that's an honest question. The church, on my end, we've got to be here for that. We've got to encourage that. We can't sell our soul and miss opportunity to join with people who are exiting, the mass exodus of online dating and say, the ancients had a lot right about socialization. The Greeks were very intelligent. Let's look at wisdom, literature, tradition, Christian faith heritage on what it is to have a community and what it is, not just the obligations and the part like hitting people over the head, but what is it to actually grow, develop, and care for one another. There's a really golden opportunity here to double down on what you're saying. Love it.
Well said. Thank you. Thanks for
Thank
being
you.
here, you guys. Just a quick one off. Be back to this topic soon, I'm sure.
This was
Thanks,
excellent.
Jeremy.
Oh, thank you. I loved it.
I
Nice coat,
agree.
by the way.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
It's cold.
Yeah.